Good morning, Crosspoint. Great to see you guys all here this morning. For you guys online as well, thanks for joining us this morning. This morning we're going to continue our neighboring series, and we're in the part of it where we're talking about eating or food. And Americans have a really interesting relationship with food. Like we like food a lot. We have a food network, and it's often one of the things I fall asleep to at night is an episode of Chopped or Guys Grocery Games. That's kind of how I fall asleep at night. And like I saw this meme recently, and I didn't save it, but it was like what the world thinks American food looks like, and it was like this giant pile of chili fries. And so what American food actually looks like, and it was a giant pile of chili fries. And there's something to that, like this big thing. Like we even have competitive eating. And it's a big deal. ESPN even televises it, right? On July 4th every year, they televise the Nathan's hot dog competition. This year it was the only sports on, is hot dogs. And Joey Chestnut broke his own record by eating a huge number of hot dogs in 10 minutes. Did anyone hear what his new record is? Guesses? 74 was last year. He did 75 this year. So 75 hot dogs in 10 minutes. It's not good news. And if you ever watched it, it's not good to watch it either. But that's not the grossest one. I found one last night that's a mayonnaise eating competition. Just straight mayonnaise, nothing else. And the record in 3 minutes is 5 pounds of mayonnaise. I don't like a tablespoon of mayonnaise, so this is the grossest thing I've ever heard in my life. We have this thing with food in America, like we have these competitions, but at the same time, we love to cook. Jody gave me his old smoker a couple weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago now, and I look for every excuse to smoke meat that I can now, because it's new and different and really fun. Food's this big deal, and it's so interesting because if you look through American history and you look through world history, eating at a table, sharing meals with people has always been a really important thing. But that's shifted in our culture, and even pre-COVID, pre-quarantine realities, there's been this massive downturn in people spending time with other people. In 1950, a third of Americans would play bridge with other people on a regular basis. A third of Americans. I don't even know what bridge is. I know it involves cards, but I have zero idea how to play it, and I play a lot of cards. But 33% of Americans played one game on a regular basis with people. In this book, Bowling Alone, Robert Putnam talked about the shifts that had happened in society from 1975 to 2000. So this is 20-year-old research. But people who attending club meetings had declined 58%. Everything from Boy Scouts to the Lions Club. In those 25 years, there was a 58% decline. Family dinners dropped 43%, and 35% of people stopped having friends over altogether in those 25 years. This isolation that was happening, and that's 20 years ago, and I think it's safe to say that it's continued and grown even up to now. There's this pastor in Indianapolis, and he says this: if we don't have time to share meals and nurture friendships, even with our coworkers and friends, we have ceded too much ground to the cult of speed. Like any false god, the cult of speed requires sacrifices. And in this case, human connection and common flourishing are sacrificed. Its bitter fruits are isolation, alienation, and the death of conversation. You guys, we live in a time where for a lot of people, the idea of sharing a meal with somebody that's outside of their family, or maybe even in their family, is countercultural. Something that was really normal throughout history of the world has now become this countercultural practice of just eating with people. And there's this really cool opportunity we have because we have this ability to do this thing, just eating with people, with this intentionality, and it's actually one of the greatest ways we can join God at work. Our big idea this morning is that eating together moves strangers to neighbors and neighbors to families and friends. Eating together moves strangers to neighbors and neighbors to family and friends. When we look at Jesus' ministry throughout all of the Gospels, you see that food is massively important to him. It's central to what he's doing. And in this time, what you ate and who you ate with were often the most important things about your different religions. Who was in, who was out, what food was clean, what food wasn't. And we see throughout the Gospels, especially the Gospel of Luke, food is central to what Jesus is doing. One commentator says in the book of Luke, Jesus is always either going to a meal, at a meal, or coming from a meal in every single chapter. It's the central place of being at the table. In chapter 5, he sits with tax collectors and sinners in Matthew's house. In chapter 7, he is anointed at the home of Simon the Pharisee during the meal. So he's at a tax collector's house in chapter 5. He's in a Pharisee's house in chapter 7. And in chapter 7, he says this, the Son of Man came eating and drinking, and you say, here's a glutton, a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is proved right by all her children. Meaning, like, you guys are calling me all these things because you see me eating with all these different people and having drinks with people that you wouldn't consider okay. But wisdom's going to show out in the end. The fruit of what I'm doing will show out in the end. In chapter 9, he feeds the 5,000. In chapter 10, he's at the home of Mary and Martha. In 11, he's at a meal where he condemns the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. At 14, he's at a meal when he urges people to stop only inviting their friends and show preferential treatment towards the poor and the outsider. Chapter 19, he invites himself to dinner with Zacchaeus. And in chapter 22, the Last Supper. Throughout Luke, in almost every chapter, it revolves around Jesus having meals with people. Because something sacred happens when we sit together over food. In Luke 22, or in Mark 14, in Mark 14, this is the Last Supper account in Mark, it says this, when evening came, Jesus arrived with the 12. And while they were reclining at the table eating, he said, truly I tell you, one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me. They were saddened, and one by one they said to him, surely you don't mean me. It is one of the 12, he replied, the one who dips bread into the bowl with me. The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him. But woe to the man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, take it, this is my body. Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, and they all drank from it. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many, he said to them. Truly I tell you, I will not drink again from the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new in the kingdom of God. When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. So it's the night before the crucifixion, there's like this key last time together, and it happens to be around a table, around a meal. And it's really crucial when we look at the way his whole ministry is set up, that he has this space, this time, because when you're sitting at a meal, you have a chance to talk, you have a chance to share things. You have a chance to converse and listen in just a different way than you do in other settings. And one of the things that I find really interesting in this passage is just this language of the 12. The 12. Over the past 3.5 years, these 12, the disciples, they've journeyed with Jesus. They've walked all over Israel with him. They've had dozens and dozens and dozens of meals and hard conversations and laughter and all these things. And this meal, the Last Supper, is the culmination of all those times together. When I think of the disciples, and I think it's because we kind of know the end of the story, where they are at this point, I view them as this really connected group of guys. Like that they're always just in step with each other, and then they're thinking the same way. That's just what my mind does when I hear the 12 or the disciples. But that's not the case at all. When we look at where they came from, they're all over the place. The 12 are made up of people of diverse backgrounds. 4 of them are fishermen. 2 of those 4 were the sons of a pretty rich business owner, and the other 2 were just guys who worked for them. One guy was out praying for the Messiah to come under a tree and notices Jesus and is like, yep, that's the one, and invites a friend to come with him. One is a skeptic and a cynic and is always voicing his doubts. There's 2 we know nothing about except for their names are Simon and the younger and James the lesser. Like that's all we got, is that they're younger and lesser than the other James and Judas in the group, sorry. And then there's these 3 that are really wild. One is a political activist, a zealot whose whole goal, everything he wanted was to overthrow the Roman Empire. And another one was a co-conspirator with Rome, a tax collector who worked in step with the Roman government. And then you have Judas at this meal, who's going to betray Jesus in the end. These 12 guys, vastly different backgrounds, vastly different understandings of how the world should work, vastly different ideas of how the Messiah should come, how government should work, all these different things. There's this group of people that shouldn't be able to be along, and by the 3.5 years of time together, and they're just called the 12. You have a guy who wants to overthrow Rome and a guy who's been working for Rome in the same room. I'm sure that first meeting didn't go well. But by this point, because they're united and they've spent all this time together, it's in a different space. 3.5 years of conversations and dialogue and watching what Jesus did. Now these guys are big fans of each other. They're supporting each other. They're this collective group, the 12, the disciples. Because eating together moves strangers to neighbors and neighbors to families and friends. And this practice of eating with people and becoming closer with people, its effectiveness was continued post Jesus' death and resurrection. In the 4th century, Emperor Julian of Rome was complaining to his officials about the Christians' methods for perverting the empire. And one of their main methods was that they had this so-called love feast, and they ate together every week. They were perverting the empire with it, by spending time and inviting people in and having meals with them. And this was just one of the ways they carried it out. And it wasn't just about communion. It wasn't like the love feast often is like this idea of the Lord's Supper. But it was more than that. It was literally just meals. And so we have like data that in the 3rd century, they were gathered in the morning for communion and in the evenings for another meal where everyone was invited and open. This open table idea where we could grow. The eating has been at the core of what is meant to be a Christian, a core of the expansion of the church from the beginning. From the beginning. Eating together is still one of the best ways to join in God's work. Eating with people, inviting them to have meals with, is still one of the best ways to join in God's work. And it's the way we get to know strangers and family and friends and move people along that continuum. And we get this when we think of like our normal lives, right? Like in church world, it feels a little weird. It feels like I might be using somebody. But when I think of my normal life, of course I invite people to meals when I want to get to know them better. So when Megan and I are from the same little town in Michigan, we were 1 year apart in school. I'm a year older. And we had a lot of mutual friends, but we didn't really hang out that much. We hang out a little bit my senior year. I can remember seeing her at a softball game and talking to her for like a half hour. Like that's the one memory I have of her when I was still in high school. And then I went away to college for a year, came back, and we started seeing each other. We'd run into each other at these open houses, and I started to really like Megan. And so that summer I was interning as a middle school leader at my home church. And I always had to run all these errands. So I'm like, hey, Megan, you want to run errands with me and maybe we'll grab dinner afterwards? And I can remember the first night we did it still so clearly of going to Applebee's and sitting there for hours just talking. And that night I was hooked. I don't think she was hooked yet. It took a little longer. But I was hooked already. And so I kept asking her to more meals, kept asking her to hang out and more time because I wanted to get to know her more and more and more. There's something different that happens when we're sharing a meal with somebody. There's something sacred that happens when you're breaking bread and talking and doing these things. It's just different than just regular talking. Slow conversation makes sense at that point. Long listening makes sense at that point. When we get to know people, we get to know people better when we share meals because we're sharing more than just food. Henry Nouwen, who's one of my favorite authors, says this: when we invite friends for a meal, we do much more than offer them food for their bodies. We offer friendship, fellowship, good conversation, intimacy, and closeness. When we say, help yourself, take some more, don't be shy, have another glass, we offer our guests not only our food and drink, but also ourselves. And a spiritual bond grows, and we become the food and drink for one another. It's this picture that when we share meals, especially when we're inviting people in and giving them something, or even if it's ordering out, but we provided it. There's something different that happens there, and there's this bond that happens, and as we socially connect, we start to spiritually connect too. And deep conversations can happen. This is the dynamic of why eating is so important and such a powerful move when it comes to joining God's work in our world. And while I don't feel comfortable right now, telling you guys to start hosting giant parties in your house in the middle of COVID-19, that's not at all what we're talking about this morning. We have to live in our current reality. There are still ways that we can engage this work in our lives. God is no less on the move today than he was months ago or last summer. He's still on the move in the lives of the people around us. And so maybe it looks like beverages and dessert on the back porch. Maybe it looks like grilling in your driveway and just seeing who will pop by. Maybe it's some Sunday morning when you're not able to be here, setting up a TV in your garage and inviting some people over and doing church and having a little watch party together with food afterwards. There's all these different ways, even in a season where we're trying to be more careful about who we're around and who they're around, just to be as wise as we can, to notice where God's at work, the people he's bringing up in our lives, and to invite them in to spend time over meals with them. So I want you to take a second here. Who comes to mind? As we sit here and think, and maybe you need to pull out your phone for a second and write it down so you don't forget digitally or on paper, but who comes to mind? Who's in your neighborhood? Who's someone you work with? Who's someone whose paths you cross that you don't know super well, know well enough that a COVID-19 invitation won't feel awkward, like unnecessarily awkward. It's going to feel awkward because moving towards people does. But who's someone you could move towards this week? I was listening to a pastor named Hugh Halter talk about the practices that he and his wife have put in place to kind of do this thing. And what they've done is that every day they would get out of work a little bit before other people. They get out about 4 o'clock, and then they would sit on their front porch and they would have just some snacks and some beverages ready to go. So when they saw their neighbors pulling in, they would say, "Hey, do you want us to stop over for a drink quick?" They talk for 15, 20 minutes. And it built this insane community in their neighborhood by just sitting on their front porch. Bought rocking chairs so it felt more legit. And just engaging with neighbors as they came in. And those led to longer meals, and those led to deeper conversations. But it happens as we just move towards the people in our lives in normalish ways. Now, if you're anything like me, I'm pretty introverted. My house is my castle. When I open my garage door and walk in and shut it, the castle door has been shut and no one is supposed to interrupt me the rest of the night. That's the way I engage my home. I also live in the middle of nowhere, so I don't really have neighbors, so this gets a little tricky sometimes. But when I start thinking about, even when a name comes to mind of someone who maybe I should be leaning towards, I automatically have the voice of resistance and cynicism and excuses enter my brain. Like, well, I don't even like to have people in my house. It's uncomfortable for me, and I don't even like to cook, so I don't really cook anything. Okay? Then order something. Do the simple things like backyards, bonfires, front porches, drinks and snacks. Do the little things. Push past that resistance you feel to engage people. Maybe it's more of a like, I'm not sure I know this person well enough to talk for a long time. Well, that's good because the second practice, you guys remember the first practice with prayer this summer? What was the second practice? Close. Listening. Yeah, when you're inviting people over, you're not supposed to be worrying about carrying the whole conversation. That's your time to ask all the questions that people love to talk about. Where did you grow up? What was your family like? What do you do for work? And like, how long have you done it? How did you meet your boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance, spouse? Tell me about your kids. What's your favorite vacation you've ever took? Pepper people in a great way with questions to get them telling their stories, because I don't know about you, but when someone asks me meaningful questions about who I really am, what my family like, and what my background is, I feel cared for. And connection happens. And so you don't like to have people at your house, that's okay. Set up some simple ways for you to do it. You're not sure if you can handle all the conversation and talking that much. Yeah, that makes sense. Ask good questions and listen a lot. And maybe is the roadblock you're feeling is that I'm not sure if I actually have enough time to do this. I'm super busy. I believe that. The months leading up to March, before COVID became our reality, were by far the busiest months I have ever lived in my life, and they were horrible. My kids were involved in really great things, but it was killing me because I was on the go all the time between 6 a.m. basketball practices and play practice not getting done till 9 at night. Sometimes that means I didn't get home in between all that fun stuff. Having 4 kids in 3.5 years will ruin your schedule, guys. It was all great stuff, but I was dying. I was exhausted. And then COVID hits, and I'm like, I'm not that kind of busy anymore, but just like this general like anxiety and stress between the pandemic and numbers and racial tensions and the polarization and political fighting that's going on, all this stuff, I'm worn down already. I'm doing less than I was in February, March, but I'm more tired right now just because of this general insanity that I'm finding myself in. I feel like I'm too busy. But then there's this thing, if we're talking about meals, we're talking about sharing that with somebody. Like there's this, Gino, how many meals do you eat a day? 2. You're one of those guys, intermittent fasting. Yeah, so most people are 2 to 5, somewhere in there, right? So we're going to go with the normal average of 3. So if there's 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, that means you have 21 meals throughout the week in some sort. Some may be like eating a fast food sandwich with your knees on the steering wheel as you're driving down the highway. Some of them might be like you made a smoothie quick on the way out the door. That was my morning. What would it look like to give one of those away? 1 out of 21. What would it look like this week to live into like, yes, I'm really busy, but I can find a way to give one of those times away to somebody, to a family, to someone I don't know as well, to someone that's not necessarily part of my church family, but it's someone that I'm getting to know, and maybe it's someone that God is moving me towards, because here's what I really believe is that when we eat with people, and we really get to know them, and they really get to know us, that's when some of these dialogues that we don't get to have when we're not spending time with people become good dialogues instead of fighting matches. Without arguing. We just get to understand each other. And that person gets to know you and has a chance to get to know God through you. When we look at the way Jesus lived and the meals he engaged in, the way he engaged people, a lot of times we see that his communion, his relationship, his meals with people preceded their conversions. It wasn't he converted them to make sure that they were the right people or thought the right way and then he would eat with them. It was that their conversions were often the result of him moving towards them and getting to know them. I think specifically of Zacchaeus, the tax collector hiding in the tree, that after Jesus invites himself over for dinner, he repents of what he's been doing, promises to pay back, and becomes a follower of Jesus. A communion, a dinner before a conversion. Because when we eat together, strangers become neighbors, and neighbors become friends and family. So this week, I'd love to ask you to give one of your meals away. If you're feeling daring, 2. But one of your meals away. Maybe it's a happy hour on your porch. It's not even a full meal. Maybe it's Friday night, and you order pizza in. Sit on the back porch if it's not unnastily humid out. I'm not made for humidity, guys. This is driving me nuts out there right now. Your homework this week is this. All of our homework this week is this. Allow God to change your heart for the people around you. And by that I mean just open your eyes to the people around you. Whose lives is he working in, and how can you to move towards that person? And invite someone to be listened to and known on a deeper level. In November of 2018, there was this 28-year-old man named Eric who stopped at a McDonald's in Indianapolis on his way into work in the morning to just have breakfast by himself. And a 70-year-old woman named Jan had stopped in for the same reason. And after she got her food, she noticed him sitting by herself. And she walked over to him and said, "Hey, do you mind if we have breakfast together?" And so he's like, "Absolutely, that sounds great." So he pushes a chair out and she sits down. And they talked together and ate for 45 minutes. 75-year-old woman named Jan, 28-year-old single dad named Eric. No connection before that. And they talked for about 45 minutes until Eric walked her to her car. They swapped phone numbers and connected after that. And the reason we know it is that there was a teacher at McDonald's that saw this happen, was watching it kind of happen, and took a picture of it and shared this story. She said, "Shout out to this guy. This elderly lady seemed to be a little lonely, and she came up to him and asked if she could sit with him. The teacher wrote, 'My friends and I watched him introduce himself and shake her hand. They talked and laughed together like they were friends, and they didn't even know each other, and they couldn't be more different. But they shared a meal together, and it touched our hearts.'" This post went viral. Within a couple days, there was over 10,000 comments on this teacher's picture. Things like, "Love and kindness, a winning combination. We need more of this in our chaotic times, and this is how the world should be." A simple request and then a great conversation about their mutual love of art and Eric's young family. Because a woman was feeling kind of lonely and walked up to a guy and said, "Can I eat with you?" And he said, "Yeah." And I think the reason it went viral is because so many of us are craving more connections. More connection, have deeper connection than we have. And if that's not you, that's awesome. But the amount of loneliness in our society, the amount of loneliness in the modern world is a cancer to what's going on in our lives. The amount of aloneness people are feeling. There's a stat I read like a year ago that over a quarter of pubs in England had closed over like a 2 or 3 year period. And that might sound good if we're trying to live on the anti-alcohol spectrum, but it was bad because the pub is the central of the social life in England. People are staying in by themselves more. We were made for connection. And for you and I, when we engage the work God has for us, one of the best ways to do that is to eat with the people around us, to ask lots of questions, to get to know and be able to start naming where God might be working in their lives. A few reminders as we get ready to leave this morning, just some practices we have in place here, is that our offering baskets are in the back. If you brought offering with you this morning, you can drop those on your way out. We'd ask you as much as possible to, if we're going to congregate and hang out and talk, to do it outside. It's just safer outside at the current reality, or if you have masks on inside, that's great too. Just do your best to stay social distance, to care for each other. And if as we're leaving, please let the people in the back leave first, and we'll kind of just progress out the doors in those ways as best as possible. Thank you guys for your work as we all try to figure out this current reality together. Would you pray with me? Jesus, thank you for your love. Thank you that when we look at your life, it's not just about you coming and dying for our sins. You do that, and we are eternally grateful for that. But you also give us this picture and this model of what it looks like to love the world the way you do, and often it includes meals. So I pray this week that you would inspire us and give us the people, help us to discern the people you have in mind for us to get to know a little bit better this week, to move towards and offer a space of connection, that we may get to know them better and ultimately that they may get to know you. Thank you for your love, all you're doing in our church, in our world. It's in your name we pray. Amen.